kids
Mhm.
behave differently in different environments. They behave differently at school with me and classmates versus at home
Yeah.
with their parents, where they feel like really safe to be themselves. And that's something that I have seen for my son is the difference in behavior at school versus at home.
Yes, for sure. There were pieces that we would talk to teachers about with our kids and say, our kiddo may seem like everything is steady for them at school. They're here, they're smiling, they're talking to people,
Mhm.
but because of this piece of them, that the sensitivity piece for them, it can
Mhm.
be really draining to maintain that. And it can be referred to as masking, it can be referred to as being an empath. There's a lot of different pieces that could be playing into this for different people. But I would always tell teachers, I like to voice that piece is my kids are sensitive. They are very big rule followers and they have a little bit of a perfectionist piece to them. So, yes, they're sitting in the right spot. Yes, they're raising their hand to speak. Maybe they're toning things down, but it can be really draining to them. So, getting
Yeah.
movement in, getting sensory breaks, not stressing perfection is a huge one that I had to talk to when we were in a traditional school setting.
Mhm.
So, do you feel like there's a point where you're ready to go talk to a teacher or any of
Such a
those
great
pieces?
question. Yeah, I do feel there will be the time to be able to do that. And yeah, I totally see that same thing for our son.
Welcome to Heart Parents. Let's connect with our kids and learn together. I'm Carrie. I was a former teacher and speech therapist. I'm also a parent of two spirited, gifted, highly sensitive kids. I was quickly brought to my knees as a parent when I thought that I would see a rosy lens version of parenting just as they present on Instagram, but I quickly learned that's not real life. I will provide real life experiences and transform them into moments for connections and change for you to use in your house. Hi there, conscious parents. Before we start today's episode, it's Carrie here, and I wanted to reach out to ask you guys for a quick favor. As a follower of our show, we would love for you to give us a 5-star rating and leave us a review. It can be just a few words, that's it. And it really goes a long way with us, with the podcasting community on Apple or Spotify. So thanks so much for tuning in, and I'm so excited for you to hear today's message. Happy listening. Even teachers are brought to their knees when they have children. It's a completely different experience when we have children from when we're teaching in the classroom. When we become that parent, we have these pieces that bubble up inside of us. We have this new little tiny person that we are emotionally completely involved with, and it can be hard to hear our hearts. So today I have a wonderful guest. We're talking about when we were formerly teachers, as we became parents, as we started to realize that our children were highly sensitive kiddos, and the training that we did not receive as teachers transitioning into parents, and what that was like to raise these highly sensitive kids, how we had to really dive into helping our children socially and emotionally. I have Joanne Homestead, who's an expert email copywriter, holistic copy coach, and obsessed storyteller with over 15 years of experience creating captivating and aligned messaging as a master teacher. I love this piece of you, Joanne, because I feel like you are such a fabulous communicator in so many different forms, in more ways than one. So, spoken and written, I just love your communication pieces.
Carrie, thank you so much. I love being here. I have, as I said to you, been listening to your podcast and I just absolutely love it. And it has really made my parenting journey less lonely. It's been so good. So thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Thanks so much, Joanne. I love hearing things like that. If I can connect with one other parent, it feels job well done. So, Joanne, you had a teaching background just like me. And recently I was listening to a podcast that I was on, and we were talking about some of our teaching strategies and how they carry over into our parenting. It feels like there's this highly sensitive piece that we're learning so much about. Do you feel like we were given a good background for this when we went through our teaching experience? What are your thoughts on this?
Totally not prepared. Just for some background, I
Mhm.
got my bachelor's degree in childhood education. So that
Mhm.
was to be able to get the K-6 teacher
Yep.
certification. You go through the childhood developmental courses, education, pedagogy, all that stuff. And you come out of it, you take the exams, you got your license, you've done your student teaching, and you get into the classroom. And then it's what what did I gain from all that education and
Yes.
even the student teaching? You just get thrown in
Hmm.
and you're really like learning as you go. That is
Yeah.
that's how it goes. You're learning as you go. And one of the pieces that is really not brought up at all is that social emotional piece about
Mm.
how like the whole mindfulness about all of that. That was not even okay. So I got my bachelor's degree back in the early 2000s. It's been a long
Yeah.
time. That was the terminology, that lingo was not there at all. There was a social emotional piece, there is, but definitely was not a focus.
We did not get a training in that. I love thinking about that so much. I think we had a very small amount of social emotional, which is a huge piece of child development and a huge piece of pieces that we need to be thinking about in their school. We received some behavioral management. We had a course on that, and it was
Yeah.
all very traditional. Did you have
Yeah.
that as well?
Yes, definitely behavior management and yeah, very traditional. And yeah, that was about it. I felt like I got my first dip in, I'm gonna say quote unquote training in like the social emotional piece and then mindfulness and also like executive functioning for kids in the classroom when I was teaching second grade. And that was, I'm trying to remember how many years that was now. Say like 10 years ago from
That's
now.
really cool.
And our school had adopted a new curriculum for it. It's called Second Steps. And they had it for each grade level. So built on each grade level. And you teach it once a week for it's like 30 minutes. And so I really loved that having that curriculum. It was age appropriate. I felt
Mm.
like the activities and the exercises, and they had little stories and role playing and little videos and songs to go with
Mm.
each one. And that was my first introduction to more of a formal, quote unquote, I'm saying training because they never trained us. They just gave us the curriculum, which is what happens a lot of times as a teacher is here's your new curriculum. Go ahead and you implement that. Just go ahead. And I just started using it and I really loved it. And since then, I've hopped around to different school districts and schools and have found more, I feel like more formal social emotional curriculum. I feel like it's gaining momentum, but
Yeah.
it's still something that's almost just once a week, just like a
Mhm.
little 30 minutes right here. And I think a big part of that is implementing it in the classroom every day. So yeah, you have the lesson, you do the role playing, you discuss and talk and you practice, but then okay, now we are in like real life here in the classroom. How is this going to play out? And so I think that's a piece where there could be maybe more training for teachers on okay, how do you
Mhm.
really like implement this in the classroom for different kids?
Yeah.
Kids might need a little different approach. So that's my experience with the social emotional piece in teaching and how it's evolved over the years.
I like to see that they are making some progress. It sounds like it might be small steps, but it's nice to see some progress. I myself, when I had my kids, I started looking into Montessori and Waldorf, and I started to teach myself a lot of those pieces. And I was so drawn to both of them having these social, emotional pieces, these mindset pieces, mindfulness trainings for some of the kids. And I loved that. I started following a lot of people on Instagram and trying to learn more about those areas. And even like with Montessori, it had some pieces of the child feeling empowered and
Mm,
strong and being at an equal level with grown-ups.
Yeah.
instead of saying, here's your giant person chair, here's your
Yeah.
giant person plate that's really heavy, or belittling kids for, or letting kids feel small in these big situations that are only tailored for adults. So I loved that piece, and I started to teach myself that piece.
Hmm.
And thinking about the highly sensitive person, I started to think about, oh, as I read that book as well during that same era for myself. I started to understand my kids as being highly sensitive. Oh, this makes a lot of sense. Was there a point when you felt like that might have been introduced to you in your life?
Yeah. So to talk about the resources out there, like you were talking about, like
Yeah.
Montessori, Waldorf. For me, it was like the Second Steps curriculum that was made specifically for classrooms and teachers, but also Brainwise is another one that I think
Mm,
started locally in Denver.
wow.
That is also, it was a really great resource that they use in the Jefferson County School District. But they talk about wizard brain and lizard brain.
Love
And
that.
all kinds of, like, I just love the different kinds of creative lingo that people come up with to help teach it to kids to help them understand. But also,
Yeah.
even for myself, I've learned, I feel like I have learned as an adult because I did not get that as a
Mhm.
child growing up. Oh, that makes so much sense about the wizard brain and the lizard brain, or thinking about like how calming down looks like with your five fingers, like showing it visually. Oh, wow, that makes so
Mm,
much sense to me. So I have learned a lot for myself as an adult. For me, having my son who is highly sensitive, we could just, it was almost something we could just tell from like day one when he was born.
mhm. Yeah.
There was something that we could tell, like sensory wise, just he's a very big internal processor. He will observe, he would just watch and observe. And he likes to be like, the pandemic for him was like the best time. 6 feet
Mm,
away was like the ideal distance for him. He just
yeah.
like his bubble, his personal bubble is very big. For us, it was when I had read the book Quiet, and it is a book for adult about introverts in an extrovert society. And I
Love
can't
that.
remember the author's name. I think it's Anne, but I can't
I'll
even say
look
it.
it up.
It's Anne.
Yeah.
So that was where she talks about the highly sensitive person and does
Mm,
mention like the highly sensitive child in that book, and talks about the research. And it was really fascinating. And then she had at the end, she references highly sensitive person
mhm.
and highly sensitive child books. And so that was like my first dip in. And I believe that I read that book right when my first son was born. And
Mhm.
that kind of gave me little bits and pieces. And then
That's great.
when he started preschool, really part-time, when he turned 3.5, that's when one of our preschool teachers, after a month, she came up to us and said, "Oh, I wonder if you've heard of the highly sensitive child book. Have you read it or anything like that?"
Mhm.
And that was like such a relief for my husband and I, because we didn't want to say anything to the teachers,
Mhm.
because I feel like there's just a
Yep.
lot around like feeling, oh, I don't want to look like the parent who's like the helicopter parent or like controlling parent. We're like, but we know our child and we
Yep.
know how he's going to respond to these like new environments. But we didn't want to say anything because we're like, we don't want to sound like the parent, to be like all over the teachers. As a teacher myself,
Yep.
I'm just okay. So when she brought that up to us, that was a big moment for us because we hadn't said anything.
Mhm.
And so for her to say that was like confirmation for us. Like, okay,
Yeah.
it's not just us as the parents. We're just making things up and just being like, no, just let your child go and do those things. They can do it. Like, and we're like, no, he
No.
and so we said to her, thank you so much for bringing that up. We feel like this is something that is definitely, we feel like we're saying. So we did get the book and we read it, and
Mhm.
it really was really such a relief for us to,
Mhm.
okay, we're not just making things up. Check, check. Yes, all these things. Like we felt like we could really resonate with that book. Yes, and yes here and yes to
Mhm.
there. And so that was really our start off to the journey for us.
Yeah. I love that. And isn't that interesting that as a parents, we have this feeling like I had a feeling my kiddo was gifted and talented, but I didn't want to be the mom tooting her horn, knocking on the G&T door, like, hey, my kid's gifted. Can you put him in the gifted classes? I didn't want to be that annoying mom. Or I thought in my mind, like, is he really gifted? Am I making my child this big person in my mind? Do I have a chip on my shoulder? And even as specialists, like we both taught in that field and we took the child development classes. We know where the small median of what normal education would look like. We know where our kids fit, but we still have to have that confirmation from someone else to say, oh yeah, they're gifted. Oh, yeah, they're a sensitive kiddo. It's interesting that our minds are there and we're thinking that, but we're still needing that person to tell us from outside.
Yeah, I think it is a piece of that not wanting to feel judged. We don't want to be judged for, oh, I don't want to be that parent.
Yeah, totally.
I don't want to be that parent as a teacher. Okay, I see it from the teacher perspective, and now I can really see it from the parent perspective. And it really is it's a really different experience coming from the
Mm-hmm.
parent perspective. And
Yep.
as a teacher, I felt like I always wanted to respect the parents coming to me, what concerns they had, what are they saying. I really wanted to respect that because I'm like, yeah, you know them because you spend all your time
Mm-hmm.
with them, you raise them. And so I think that's always like great information to have on my side because I see them in the classroom. And yeah, we spend all day in the classroom together, but it's different when they're at home. And kids behave differently in different environments.
Mm-hmm.
They behave differently at school with me and classmates versus at home
Yep.
with their parents where they feel like really safe to be themselves. And that's something that I have seen for my son is the difference in behavior at school versus at home.
Yes, for sure. There were pieces that we would talk to teachers about with our kids and say, our kiddo may seem like everything is steady for them at school. They're here, they're smiling, they're talking to people,
Mhm.
but because of this piece of them, that the sensitivity piece for them, it can
Mhm.
be really draining to maintain that. And it can be referred to as masking, it can be referred to as being an empath. There's a lot of different pieces that could be playing into this for different people. But I would always tell teachers, I like to voice that piece is my kids are sensitive. They are very big rule followers and they have a little bit of a perfectionist piece to them. So, yes, they're sitting in the right spot. Yes, they're raising their hand to speak. Maybe they're toning things down, but it can be really draining to them. So, getting
Yeah.
movement in, getting sensory breaks, not stressing perfection is a huge one that I had to talk to when we were in a traditional school setting.
Mhm.
So, do you feel like there's a point where you're ready to go talk to a teacher or any of
Such a
those
great
pieces?
question. Yeah, I do feel there will be the time to be able to do that. And yeah, I totally see that same thing where our son is. He will follow all the rules. He's got a smile. He'll talk. He'll do the thing, but it takes a lot out of him. And that's just coming from the experience of 3 years in preschool, where the first year he was there just in the mornings, 2 days a week. The second year,
Mhm.
it's 3 days a week in the morning. And the third year, which was just last year, was 5 days a week, afternoons.
Oh,
So not like full days, but 5 days a week.
wow.
And I could really see how it
Mm.
strains him to be able to keep that up
Mm-hmm.
in that
Yep.
environment. And now that he's starting kindergarten and now he's in full-time kindergarten,
Mm-hmm.
that's something that my husband and I have really been preparing him for this summer. And it's something that we don't share a whole lot because, again, like the judgment piece, people will
Yep.
be like, really? It's just kindergarten. He's going to be fine. And we're like, no, we really we know him. We need to prepare him for this. And
Yep.
we had a really great successful transition in this
Mm.
week. But I also cleared my schedule for this week.
Mm.
It's emotional space for us
Good.
because it really has come a long way since starting preschool and also for him too, coming home and being able to clear our schedule so I know like we can be there we've realized one-on-one time for him is really
Mm.
helpful for him to be able to regulate himself again and feel like, okay, now he feels, I don't know, some like energy released or something like that.
Yeah, just that one-on-one is such a great connection tool after school. And even if the kiddo is prepared to go in, I still feel like even my kiddo going into third grade, it's still a little bit of a shock on on their systems. Like they're
Uh,
getting up earlier, they're having to move a little faster. Even if they were in camp, you're still transitioning into a new classroom, new group of students, new teacher. Even if you had in our school, they have the same teacher for 2 years in a row.
mhm.
That is still a transition from being home with mom or being at a camp with lots of kids. It's a change no matter what. So for
Right.
our sensitive kids, there's always that time. It takes a couple of weeks to just give extra love, give extra time, give extra hugs. And I love that one on one. If you have two kiddos, having one spouse take one kiddo and you take the other kiddo, and they just get to be themselves with you. They don't have to make any accommodations for brother or sister. I love
Yeah.
that piece. Or even a lot of the activities in our area, I feel like this area is very heavy in their activities. I was at 6 o'clock trying to get into woodworking with my husband the other day for our son. Like, race
Wow.
the other parents. We need to get this class. On your mark, get set, go. And he was on one computer, I was on the other, trying to each get the
Yeah,
kid in at this for the same class. Like it was very
I love
complicated. But okay,
that.
hon, this is for the September class. We're gonna let the kids transition in. Even if the classes start this week, we're
Mhm.
probably gonna skip this week, the first
Mhm.
week of school, the second week of school, even. I'm going to be reading my kid. I'm not going to be over signing them up in like the current culture of American families, right?
The
Over
act
signing
the
up our kids.
activities, yeah, yeah, a lot of it, we talk with a lot of our neighbors and they always ask us like, oh, is our son doing soccer or this or that? And we're like, no, none of it, because
Mm,
really it just needs to be so gradual for him to be able to get to that point to be able to
mhm,
go and do those things. He has the activities. I love that. So that was actually something that we had to keep in mind was last year he was also signed up to go to Chinese language school, which is
mm.
just down we can walk there in a minute or two.
Wow, that's
But it's on
great.
Sundays. And so I did not sign him up for this semester because we already know like full-time kindergarten for him is really, we're
Yeah.
just going to focus on that and then really make sure we get that one-to-one connection. Yeah. And he has a younger brother. Well, how parents do it when they have more than two kids.
That's
I don't
true.
know.
That's
I
true
don't
with my
know how that
example.
works. I don't know how that works. So we have the two, and so he can be with one, I can be with the other, and
Mhm,
then he can really get that one-on-one time that he needs. That's our number one strategy is
mm,
if there's a
yeah.
lot going on and we know he's going to be drained from that
Yep.
one-on-one time, like really have to schedule it in. This is not like a
Mhm.
little like afterthought.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm glad you gave the example when you have more than two, because I was just giving my example. That's a good point. And also reading them in the day to day too. My daughter had her first day yesterday, and she was the child who did not want to go to school. She was very sad about going back. She kept saying, I want to stay home with mom. But I also know this is my triple Aries daughter, who is a fire sign. I don't know if you follow signs at all, but she is spicy and it is amazing and I love it. And she's born in the right era to be spicy. So I knew, I kept telling her, if you stayed home with mom, you would get bored by 12 p.m. Plus mom would be passed out at 12 p.m. because you're exhausting sometimes with your energy trying to keep you going. So my mama heart was really having a hard time yesterday dropping her off at school. I'm like, what is it going to be like? It's a new teacher this year, a brand
Mhm.
new teacher to the school. I don't know her. I was very nervous. And she came home. She was very happy, just
Mhm.
happy as heck. And I had not ever seen her like that after school in her previous years. This is a kid
Wow.
who was at home during the pandemic with the
Mhm.
four people, loved being at home, really connected, and had a hard time going out to the zoo, going out to places where other people were when we
Yeah.
started going back out.
Yeah.
So seeing that happiness was amazing. And my
Yeah.
husband was like, yes, this is great. We can do these things with her. We'll do some playtime. And then she just crashed at the end of the night. So it's just following our kids minute by minute and checking in and seeing like, how are they doing? Is the
Yeah.
crash coming today? It usually
Right.
comes second week. If it hasn't come the first week, there's
Right.
going to be a crash.
Yeah, there's going to be a crash. Yeah, that's what we
Yeah.
usually have in our minds too. Like when it's going to happen, when is it going to happen? And how can we fully prepare ourselves as much as we can? You can't like
Yeah.
there's always like a piece of unpredictability. Ooh, that's hard to say. But there's also that was also I feel like a piece of as a teacher for being a teacher for that long, like what I learned was all the different behaviors and how can we prevent those behaviors? And if
Mhm.
behaviors you do see come up, okay, how do you approach it so that it's not like the traditional approach to like negative behaviors or anything like that? And that's something that I feel like I've been able to bring into the parenting piece is like being able to predict things that might happen and how can we prevent that from happening so that we're all having a much better experience.
Yeah. One of the books that I love that's really helped my husband and I to understand some of the behaviors that can happen with raising a sensitive child or neurodiverse child. My kids have the G&T piece, so it brings in neurodiverse pieces too. And it might not work for everyone, but it was the explosive child. I
Mm,
think it's by Ross Greene. I'll have to double check the author. But a lot of the pieces in it are talking about finding the patterns, finding the root cause of the behavior and trying to help it before you get to the explosive moments. Yeah, and I think with our teacher backgrounds and maybe other people listening, they might not have that diagnostic piece, but trying to find those patterns, it's
yeah.
really helpful when we can figure out if they're hungry, if they're tired, if they're having a long day at school, it's a new week of school, if they're over programmed with too many activities, and just finding is my kiddo a sensory seeker where they're looking for action and movement, or are they one that needs, like me, I need the quiet, calm corner where it's dark at night and I'm not talking to anyone. I'm just watching some silly TV show that's making me laugh. So
Yeah. Yeah.
finding that in your kid, that's a really good resource too that I've liked. And
Yeah, I think I just imagine that's ChatGPT, how it like takes all the sources from all the internet and puts it all together. I feel like that's what us as parents
yes.
to have the skill to do is okay, we're having this moment here. What is happening? And
Hmm.
be able to like take your brain and scan through what was the day like? How did he start the
Hmm.
day? What has been going on? How has he been
Hmm.
responding to things? Like taking all that information and being like, can I find a pattern? Can I
Yep.
find something? Where is the root cause? So then I can address it
Yep.
in a way that's appropriate. Yeah, like that
Hmm.
scanning through. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
definitely check out that book.
Yeah. And there's a lot of pieces too that make us have to have flexibility as a parent. Say a behavior is caused because one example was my son wanted to always wear shorts to school when it was 40 degrees. And I had to get over, other people would always comment, wow, he's really brave with shorts during the day or when it's so cold out. And I had to get over that of not looking like the perfect parent, or it's okay if other people are making these comments. That's not on my parenting. Maybe it is. I don't really care. I'm going to
Right.
put pants in his backpack. He's going to be ready. I don't need to fight this battle that escalates every single morning. So
Right.
part of that is like understanding ourselves, our own fears of looking different, or
Mhm.
hearing comments from other parents that are maybe judging and not meaning to, but it feels judgy. I love thinking about those pieces as well for ourselves. I've even heard people mention if you're having a lot of behaviors coming up or seeing these problems or struggles in your family, you can take notes for the day. What activities you did, when this happened, how long did it last, what did it look like, and trying to figure out the triggers too that can be helpful as well. It's
Yeah.
dangerous though because if you're for me, it opened this feeling of walking on eggshells at first. If I don't have the moon in the right place, the right
Mhm,
temperature in the house, the right
mhm.
amount of food, the right aura around us, there could be this explosive moment. And I'm trying to prevent that. When
Yeah,
really, if we can try to release that and be like, I'm doing the best I can. If we
right.
have a meltdown today, we
Yeah,
ride it out. We
yeah.
can use sensory tools to try to help them reset. We can help
Mhm,
them work through the emotion.
mhm.
Later, when they're back and they have both sides of their brain going on, we can talk about what do you think, baby, is going on, or assess it more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love how you talk about that way because yeah, there's the piece of we want to prevent things from happening and all that, but it's also, as I said, like there's the unpredictability piece. Like it's just this is
Mhm.
life. It's
Yeah.
life happening, okay? Like we can prevent everything. That's just not even possible. But that what you said about walking around on eggshells is how it felt for
Oof.
us too, was it felt that way. Okay, like I really walk very carefully. And how am I breathing? Am I breathing? Will this breath is it going to throw it off?
Yeah.
And I
Can
feel like
feel like that.
the parents who have kids who are like highly sensitive like that, I feel like could really relate to that because that is how it
Mhm.
times
Yeah.
is, will this blink throw it off? If I blink, I just like, yeah. So being able to have that grace for ourselves too, as
Yes.
this is life, it's happening, it happens, we're gonna get through it, we'll learn from it and see on the other end when we get through to the other end. What can we learn from it?
Well, that's a wrap. Thanks so much for tuning in, Changemakers. This is Carrie. And if you haven't done a review for us, 5 stars and a little few words about what you've enjoyed in our podcast episodes, we would really appreciate it. If you guys would like to ever message me, I would love any questions you have or any feedback at info@hearttoheartlife.com. We also have a brand new website, which we're super excited to share. It's hearttoheartlife.com. Thanks so much for tuning in, and happy life, happy times, Changemaker families. Please remember that the information shared on this podcast is educational in nature and does not constitute licensed mental health advice. If you need such advice, you should speak with a licensed professional about your unique situation. Thanks so much, happy listeners.